Now, there is a roadmap to this. I'm not going to walk through this. This is sort of the subject of another workshop, but you really can do it step by step. You have to start with the business challenges. Most of the business challenges will come from your business leaders or your top executives. And then you have to go through a soul-searching process of figuring out where the gaps are in your organization. You may already know that. Usually you need to put a little bit of science to it so you get a sense of where these people are and how big the problem is. And then you go to this green area and you start working on the various processes, HR processes, that you can implement to solve the problems. A lot of companies start down here, or they even start down here. They start at the bottom with the software. And of course, companies like Learn.com would love you to do that. But we really think you should start up here and work your way down. Ideally, because by the time you get down here, you should have such a good understanding of the business-specific issues in your company that the decisions of how to change the process should be very clear. Let me give you a really sort of entertaining example. About a month ago, I got a call from a woman at AT&T. AT&T is a research member of ours. AT&T, by the way, has reassembled itself back to the old AT&T. I don't know if you all follow this, but they're, you know, Pacific Bell, where my wife used to work, they're all gone. They're AT&T. Southwestern Bell, they're all AT&T. They just bought They've just bought Bell South. Anyway, 350,000 employees, big company. So this woman called me up and she said, I'm responsible for the global performance management process at AT&T. We now have like about 40 different processes for managing people. And I have some research I'd like to ask you about. I thought, great, this is really going to be interesting. We're really going to be able to help these people. And here was her question. Should we use a 3-point, 4-point, or 5-point scale for performance assessments? I am absolutely serious. That was the question. And, you know, and I sort of took a deep breath and I said, well, you know, we could probably help you answer that, but let me ask you a couple of questions. What is the problem you're trying to solve with this performance management? Why are you integrating all these performance management problems? What do you think Ed Whittaker, or as the CEO, really wants out of this? And she was sort of thinking, man, I don't really know, to tell you the truth. So I encouraged her to go back and spend some more time trying to figure out the answers to some of these other questions, which she's doing now. But basically what she did is they had just implemented SAP, and she was told, implement SAP across the company and figure out how to get the performance management module rolled out to everybody in AT&T. Now, can you imagine how hard that would be if you didn't really have a business driver behind it? You go tell the guys in California that are out there fixing your telephone wires that they have to change their performance management process from whatever it is they're doing now to something new, and there's no business justification behind it, they wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't work. So that's just a very simple example of why this has to be business driven. And I think AT&T hopefully will get back, and come back with a better strategy. But that's the problem you run into if you dive into this down here too early. Anyway, I won't go through all the best practices at the moment, but you'll be able to get all this in about a month. But there are some very important findings in here. There's some very key things that are very high value, and there's some things that are of less value. We did find amongst the 22 best practices, most of them are in performance management. The highest impact things you can do are essentially things that impact the way managers manage people. And by the way, to me, performance management is management. It is basically the things you do every day as a manager to coach, align, support, evaluate, assess people. And this is going on every day. This isn't something that goes on once a year. We had an email from a client yesterday, another one that sort of floored me, and they said, we're thinking about redoing our performance management process. We're thinking about changing it from a once-a-year process to a once every 3-year process. And I'm absolutely serious. And I thought, they don't really get it. I don't think they really understand what this is all about. It really ought to be done every day, in a sense. It's really something that goes on continuously. Maybe the performance appraisal goes on once a year, but you'll see, that really performance management is very important. Sourcing and recruiting, obviously, is very important. Leadership development. And then this thing that I talked about earlier is competencies. Very, very clear data here that competency management will have a huge impact on your talent management success. Now, what does this mean to you as a learning and development professional, and how can you apply this information and use it? Well, let me talk about this thing that I call talent-driven learning. And I just kind of dreamed this up, but it seems to fit. If you want to simplify all of the training that we do, and I know, believe me, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of training managers, and we've looked at many, many, many different types of training. You can broadly simplify this into two types. The first is what I would call performance-driven learning. Performance-driven learning means we have a performance problem, we've diagnosed what the problem is, there are some skills and competencies that are causing that problem, so we're going to do training to solve that problem. Okay, so call center agents are being rude to our customers are hanging up, and they're not buying our products. Let's train the call center agents how to do customer service and how to behave with customers. We are a retailer, we're trying to sell digital cameras. People are coming in the stores, they're looking at our digital cameras, they're leaving, and they're buying them somewhere else. We found out that our store employees don't know how to turn on the digital cameras, and all the batteries are dead in the digital cameras. Therefore, we can do some very simple performance-oriented training that will solve that problem. So it involves diagnosing a performance problem to a fairly good level of detail and then implementing a really focused training problem to solve it. These are great programs. We just evaluated tons of these. This is probably, if you can spend your life doing this, it's the most exciting, interesting work you can do because it has great business impact. Lots and lots of examples of this. Sales training, IT training, on and on and on. They generally are things that are aligned. They're functional in nature. They require performance consulting. How many of you have heard the term performance consulting? We talk a lot about that. In other words, they really require you to go in and diagnose the problem, itself before you develop the training program. However, there's this other type of learning program which I call talent-driven learning programs. Talent-driven learning programs are much bigger, much broader, much more complex, and they try to solve global talent-related issues. These are programs, and I'll show you what I mean by this in a minute. These are programs that focus on organizational-wide capabilities. Leadership development is a great example of a talent-driven training program. Leadership development is not about teaching somebody how to fill out a performance appraisal. That's a performance-driven training program. Leadership development is about teaching leaders how to be better managers. It's all about a lot of things. It's actually many, many topics. How to understand the business better, how to do planning, how to deal with problem employees, etc. So the talent-driven learning programs are much more broad. They're much more diverse. They tend to be competency-driven, not problem-driven. They are generally have entire curricula revolving around them. They deal with multiple levels of people in the organization. There might be a program for managers, for first-line managers, second-line managers, third-line managers, and so forth. Those are much more complex. These are programs that generally take a year to build and sometimes many years to roll out. They evolve over a long period of time, and they're usually very broad. They usually are enterprise-wide or divisional in nature. And they're done by the Learning and Development Organization. They're usually done by the corporate group because they're generally very big. And so what we're finding, and what I'm finding, is I think in terms of your jobs, you're going to be forced to balance your time between the performance-driven learning problems, which are never going to go away, and these talent-driven learning problems, which are much more complex. They need to be developed by job role. They need to be competency-based and so forth. So let me give you an example. This is a really interesting example. Last week I was at a conference, and we met with the CLO at Walmart.